This is Women Road Warriors with Shelley Johnson and Kathy Tuccaro. From the corporate office to the cab of a truck, they're here to inspire and empower women in all professions. So gear down, sit back, and enjoy.
Welcome to Women Road Warriors. We're an award-winning show that works to inspire and empower women in every profession. Our goal is to power women on their road to success. We tackle all kinds of topics, and we work to encourage women to be their very best with informative guests and women who've been champions. I'm Shelley.
And I'm Kathy.
No topic is taboo on our show. We tackle the tough topics along with the not-so-tough topics. And we like to feature experts and celebrities who can assist women in being the very best they can be. It's only been just over 100 years that women achieved the right to vote in the United States. Women have made a lot of strides since the 20th century in achieving better compensation packages at work. They've also gained entry into fields where they were previously banned. It does seem, though, that for every 2 steps forward, we've often taken 10 steps back. International Women's Day, or IWD, is a global holiday to recognize the women's rights movement. It focuses on issues like gender equality, reproductive rights, and violence and abuse against women. IWD was spearheaded by the United Nations in the mid-1970s when they designated it as a global holiday. Today we have the honor of featuring Lucia Kanter St. Amour to talk about International Women's Day and how far we've come and how far we still need to go. Lucia is an esteemed attorney, law professor, author, and vice president emeritus of United Nations Women USA. She's been on our show before and is a terrific guest. I'm seriously looking forward to our discussion. Thank you, Lucia, for being with us again. We've got so much to discuss.
And I'm so delighted to be back with you today, Shelley and Kathy, and thank you for having me back.
You are such a welcome back.
Yes,
my gosh.
You're a wealth of information. Yes, absolutely. You're such a wealth of information.
You know what's funny is last time I was here when we finished recording, I thought to myself, gosh, did I talk too much?
Oh, no. No, Lucia, you're captivating. I would love to take one of your classes. Seriously.
And just so you know, my nickname has always been Chatty Kathy, so no, you don't talk too much.
Okay, so you probably got me beat on that one, don't you, Kathy? Okay, fair enough.
So, Lucia, before we talk about IWD, I wanted to congratulate you on your latest book, Moms Get Mad. That just published. I think that's super cool. I imagine you're elated and really relieved at this point, too.
Right. That was a fun one. I released that on Valentine's Day. And so, yes, it has something to do with love. And it's full of my own collage art where I actually use glue and scissors and paper and, all kinds of things that you using your kindergarten skills in your hands to do the collage art onto original watercolors that I also did. And it's about the multitudes that mothers are and what happens when we eventually just kind of lose it at the end of the day. So not that that's ever happened to me.
Mothers have to be so many things when you think about it. It really, they all need a trophy.
Well, exactly. And there's this sort of exalted ideal of the infinitely patient mother, always loving and just never runs out of patience. And then when we can't conform to that ideal, we feel like, I shouldn't say we, I can only speak for myself, that, gosh, what is wrong with me? That am I doing this wrong? Am I not cut out for this? And it's because the ideal is false. That's just not how reality is. There are not words to describe how exhausting it is to be a parent and a mother. And I am actually a special needs mother. So look, my son with special needs wasn't independently toilet trained till he was 9.5 years old. So he will always need supervision and support.
Mm-hmm.
We are looking for group homes now for him. He's 20 years old. So he's never off the payroll. So there's that constant worry, that the constant toiling. So I really get it. And I thought, just like I would tell my law students, if it's something you're feeling or a question you're having, you're likely not the only one. So ask it, share it. You're not alone.
What a wonderful book. What a wonderful tribute to mothers. And your books are so informative. When you were last on, we talked about your book, For the Forces of Good, The Superpower of Everyday Negotiation. That's super helpful. I love your perspectives on things.
Well, that one is important because the world and topic of negotiation and negotiation literature is so dominated by not just men, but white men. And there are more and more women experts and authors coming into the field of view now on the topic. But I was maybe number 6 or so, as a woman, as a non-cisgender white male, writing about it and then taking it out of the business context, because it was also this sort of seen in this rarefied air as well. That's wow, you have to have super elite skills to negotiate and be in the C-suite and or an MBA or a sales and marketing professional or a lawyer or something. And it's utter poppycock. It's their negotiation is everywhere, every day. And it's not just for business, it's everybody's business. And I have just met far too many women in particular in my own life who don't even know how to ask for something, don't actually even think they're allowed to ask. And then when you start talking about like, well, how many of you actually even negotiated your quote unquote salary, we can return to why I'm putting that in quotes, their first job out of school, and how much that actually harms them over time, that I actually did feel like this social moral imperative to write For the Forces of Good, to encourage more women and to write it with a distinctly female voice, because I am distinctly female, and to bring it into to show that it's more of a whole pizza pie. It's not just conflict. It's not a synonym for conflict. It's not a synonym for business. It's not a synonym for sales. Those are slices of the pie, but there's a whole pizza pie with other slices in it that constitute negotiation. So bringing it, that's why the word every day. It's every day, and you have to practice it every day.
Sure.
You don't get the washboard abs by sitting on the sofa and watching the ballet bar video.
True.
You actually have to do the exercises, and you don't have to do them for very long. You can do them when I do some dog training as well. And the key to dog training is 8 minutes a day. You do 8 minutes a day of training with your dog. My dog is almost 12 years old. I still do 8 minutes a day. And when people say your dog is so well trained, well, because we do 8 minutes a day. So it doesn't have to be this long drawn out thing. The idea is that it's a habit. It's a habit, and you keep stepping up to the plate, and you practice in low stakes, everyday contexts where you can afford to get it wrong, because you will. And face planting is part of it. That is part of the learning process. So start doing it. And then when you do get to those higher stakes negotiations that will crop up, and they will, such as quote unquote salary, then you will have this more internalized voice that you are a competent negotiator, and you'll have this confidence about it. Like, I can do this, and I have an idea of how to do it. And it's not just this sort of vague confidence, like step into your confidence. No, it's, you actually know how to be strategic about it. You actually know how to do it because you've been practicing.
Practice makes almost perfect. We try to shoot for that. Yeah.
It's how to get to Carnegie Hall, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Absolutely. Lucia, your perspectives and in real world terms, you really empower so many people. And when you're talking about negotiation, it seems like women are still having to do that. That's a skill that they need for them to progress. And it's really a good transition to talk about International Women's Day, where we've come, how far we've come, and what we still need to work on. Do you feel like we've made a lot of progress? Sometimes I feel like we haven't.
We have and we haven't. And I think that we have a big blind spot when we talk about where we are now and where we've been. And unless we can recognize that blind spot in the sort of the larger feminist narrative and the way that sort of feminism is marketed, then I think we're in serious trouble. And I can tell you what I mean by that. And it's just because we forget, we think about history in terms of, maybe the past 50 years and like the time that we've been alive in the current generation. And that's why we sort of, we forget. And, these days in particular, we don't have to think much about the physical world. So outside of disability or illness, our physical bodies do not determine our limitations, our health, our livelihood, our survival, in comparison to the way things were centuries ago. And so this all factors into women and women's rights in terms of the materialism that have made women's rights possible. And it all goes back to the Anthropocene and the Industrial Revolution. And so the blind spot in the feminist narrative is, so the feminist narrative, it goes something like this, all right? And we've heard some version of this. The official narrative is like this. The process of women's liberation was long and painful, stemming from the struggles of women who mobilized, fought, and eventually obtained rights, which are still insufficient and even regressing. We must continue to fight. Does that sound familiar to you too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. True enough. But the official narrative is entirely deficient when we dissect it. And the reason it's a problem today, and this is polemic, is twofold. One, it's an abstract argument. It's sort of floating in the air on ideology, which I know, ouch, that hurts. And number two, it does not take into account the material elements that actually make those rights possible and how urgently we need to be concerned with preserving them. So it goes back to the Industrial Revolution, and that is the single greatest development in human history that contributed to the precipitous advancement of women's rights at the time, because it, in short, it rendered the biological division of labor moot, because technology was invented that could do things that were women's jobs, and got women out of the home and mobilizing into the urban areas from the rural areas, who could now be part of economic society and have jobs and be bread earners. They also still had to be mothers, but the infant mortality rate also steeply declined at the time. So whereas before you needed to have 16 children, 16 births in order to get the 8 children that you needed to work a rural farm.
Yeah.
Okay. Because the infant mortality rate was 50%, the infant mortality rate plummets. And then later on we get vaccinations. And so that means that women don't have to stay pregnant all the time. And that frees up women just exponentially to do other things, to participate in economics, in politics, in education, in society. We also have the advent of the bicycle, which was terribly important for the freedom, liberation of women to actually be able to have some freedom of movement. The other thing about the Industrial Revolution is that it's the machines, and it was all this free, abundant energy. And that energy that was so free and abundant is not abundant anymore. We're running out of it, and we're dangerously running out of it. I mean, the countries that contribute to Europe's energy sources, those sources will be halved in the next 27 years. So what's going to happen? What's going to happen when, the way that I can sit here in a podcast and with my headphones and my laptop and do this episode with you and call it work, or do a Zoom call with someone and call it work, right? Well, that relies on the metals that go into making of my laptop and the energy required to manufacture it, to distribute it. The same for a birth control pill, right? So if the energy does not, if we can fight for the Equal Rights Amendment, and we can fight for reproductive care and rights, but if we have the right to a birth control pill and it cannot be manufactured and it cannot be distributed because of depleted energy, well, that doesn't do us a whole lot of good.
No.
Does it?
No.
So this intersectionality of the climate crisis, the environmental crisis, and women's rights, and the recession of women's rights, that's not a coincidence. So that is what I mean when I say the blind spot in the feminist narrative. So when you ask me, have we made progress? The answer is yes and no. Of course, we've made progress. And now we're regressing again, not necessarily only for the reasons that we see in all the headlines, right? Reproductive rights, the ERA, right?
Mm-hmm.
Passing the ERA. It's this intersection of the depletion of free and abundant energy and the impact it will have on women's participation in education, society, economics. So what do we do? Well, the first thing is to, well, first of all, be aware of it, be aware of that blind spot and try to participate in it along the way so that we can at least mitigate, we can at least slow it down. Okay. Because if we're fighting for all these things that we get them and then we cannot use them because we don't have the energy sources to use them. And then we're back to biological division of labor, aren't we? We're already seeing crisis in childcare. Well, if parents can't get childcare, affordable childcare centers, whatever for their children, who do you think that's going to fall on, right? As energy sources deplete, the women, we're going to be back to the biological division of labor. So we've got to keep our eye on the ball here and not just on these obvious big ticket items that are so, polarizing in politics. And it's something that I think a lot of people are not thinking about, this intersection of climate and women's rights. We see it in certainly in underdeveloped countries. So if you take, say, a woman in rural Ghana, and this Ghana, let's say, contributes, they comprise something like 0.4% of the population and contribute something like 0.04 to carbon footprint globally. And the US, by contrast, is 4% of the population and contributes 25% to global carbon emissions. Okay. And then you've got, say, hurricanes, floods, droughts that affect the woman farmer in Ghana, because the women are generally the farmers and the producers of food for their communities. And now they can't do their job anymore because climate crisis has made it harder for them. So then what happens? Now they also can't get their medicine because nature is their medicine too. So they can't provide the food for their communities. That gives them less access to education, to healthcare, to economic resources. And so we generally see sex trafficking increase in that case. So climate crisis is specifically having a disproportionate impact on women and girls.
So it's a matter of people being proactive, getting people to think in broader terms. I don't think people necessarily do that. And I think people get complacent, don't they?
Well, you only know what you know.
That's true.
And people are not necessarily visiting rural Ghana. And I don't blame anyone for not doing that. Okay. And so why would you know this? Why would you necessarily piece together the disproportionate impact that the environmental crisis has on women and girls, unless someone points it out to you? So the commission on the UN's Commission on the Status of Women is approximately a 10-day meeting every March. So that's coming right up here. And every year they have a priority theme and then a review theme. So it was actually 2022, the priority theme was achieving gender equality and empowerment of all women in the context of climate change and environmental disaster and risk reduction policies. This year, 2024, the priority theme is addressing poverty and strengthening institutions and financing with a gender perspective. And the review theme is social protection systems and access to public services and sustainable infrastructure. So certainly the UN and the Commission on the Status of Women has had their eye on this, since a few years ago. And it's one of the main campaigns of UN Women, which is to mitigate the disproportionate impacts of climate on women and girls in developing countries. It's not something we have to think about much in the United States. Again, we're a wealthy country. We have a big problem with wealth gap. So we've got a real poverty problem here and access to resources, which also disproportionately affects women and children. but we don't necessarily have to think about this bigger picture. And it's awfully hard, I think, for a lot of people who are still struggling to get through the day to day in our own country to be thinking about, 27 years from now.
Oh, sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But we have to.
Mm-hmm.
We have to. We have to be participating now in the 27 years from now. So I know that was a lot, wasn't it?
No, but there's a lot to consider there. And certainly we also are still dealing with stereotypes. Human beings like to stereotype. And certainly we dealt with it in the 20th century when women were just trying to get the right to vote. That was considered not ladylike. What was it? Motor cars, when they first were out. Women shouldn't ride in them if they go over 40 miles an hour because it would be hard on the woman's reproductive system.
Right.
All of this nonsense.
Right.
Well, even in my job, there's most people think heavy equipment operators are men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sure.
So I show up looking like a Barbie doll and they're like, huh? What?
Right. Right.
There's no way.
It's like a cognitive dissonance, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's because we need our brain needs things to be simple. And that's actually an everyday negotiation tip. Okay. Keep it as simple as possible, because if the other party is confused, it's going to be a lot harder to get agreement, because then the amygdala system in the brain just lights up like a Christmas tree with fear if it's confused. And we perceive threat much greater and feel it much greater than we perceive successes. In other words, we will mistake the stick for a snake 9 times out of 10 to avoid the one time that we mistake the snake for a stick. That's how reactive we are to threats. That's how strong the negativity bias is in the brain. So if something is complicated to someone, well, that lights up that fear, that threat center in the amygdala. So one strategy for negotiating is keep it simple and make it easy for them. Make it as easy as possible for the other side, to get them to agree. Because once people are confused, then it erodes trust, and you've lost them. You've lost your audience.
When you said they say keep it simple, there's in recovery, they call it the KISS factor. Keep it simple, stupid. Right?
Yep. KISS principle. Yep.
Exactly. It's the same with negotiations. It's the same with, that's like when we talk about, LGBTQ plus rights, and we see a lot of, the transgender discussion, especially with younger people. And there's a lot of controversy over that right now. Well, why? Because it's confusing to people. It's just too confusing to people. Keep it simple. Otherwise it's threatening.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is that it's incongruent with being human. Humans are messy. We are multitudes. We are conflicted. We are complicated. I think it was Walt Whitman who said, "Do I contradict myself? I contradict myself. I'm large. I contain multitudes." And rationality is a myth. People are actually more likely to deviate from rationality than to remain consistent with it. And if we can start to understand that about ourselves and other people, and have some self-compassion for our own selves and some empathy for others, then we can de-escalate. But that's, again, like I say, with everyday negotiation, that's a practice. Self-compassion and empathy for others, that's a practice.
Yes, it is. And maybe not stereotyping. The word feminist has had negative connotations to a lot of people over the years. Certainly in the 1970s, you heard, "Oh, she's a bra burner," this kind of
stuff. And it's often preceded by the word militant.
Oh, yeah. And even the suffragists, they weren't considered ladylike. Now, I have a relative who was a suffragist, and I was raised as a little girl that voting was an obligation, and the first thing I better do is register to vote, and I embraced all of that, but I was raised that way. And certainly I was taught, there are people who have worked hard for this. And it never made any sense to me that women's brains worked any differently than men's, that, oh, gee, that's just too difficult for a woman to comprehend. These were the things that were said in terms of voting. That's just too big of a responsibility for a woman. She shouldn't vote.
Well, women's brains are going to work differently from men if the women have not been given an education and training and tools and resources to learn, and the men have.
Very true.
So then sure, their brains are going to work differently from men. I don't know if anyone listening has seen the movie, which was adapted from the book, Women Talking, which I think is on Amazon Prime right now.
Okay.
And it is extremely well written, and it is about a community. I think they might be a Mennonite community. I don't think they're Quaker, but something like that. And kind of hard to tell what year it's taking place as well. But it's a community of women who've the men have all been sent away, been arrested for aggression and rape of many of the women, and they have to decide whether they're going to stay or they're going to leave. None of them are educated. They are denied all. They can't even read or write. They don't even know what punctuation is. They have one of the men there is allowed to stay and take minutes of the meeting because he's the school teacher. So he's writing the minutes, and one of the women walks over and says, I think I know what those are. Those are letters, but what are those other markings? And he says, oh, that's punctuation. That's a comma, and that's a period, and that's it. So yes, they kept the women ignorant so that they couldn't understand. Sure, your brain's going to be different then.
Sure, it would be. And that's still going on in parts of the world. It's just terrible. Because to me, it's never made any sense. How can, say, a society values a woman being a mother? Well, how can she be a good mother and help educate her children if she doesn't have the education herself?
In saying that, I was shocked the first time I went to Grenada in 2017. And I went to go give a self-esteem class to the women in the shelter on the island. And I was stunned because I had this presentation, I was going to do this thing. I was stunned because 7 out of the 8 women couldn't read.
Right.
I was shocked. I'm like basics. So I brought it back down to basics. I ended up getting a social worker involved on the island, and then you get them just basic, introduction to reading and grammar. And oh my God, I was so stunned that in this day and age, and that was my whole thing, is that they're sitting in this women's shelter on an island. How the heck are they supposed to help themselves and their children if they can't even get they can't read, they can't get a job, they can't, it holds them prisoner. So the women, they end up going back to their abusive spouse.
Yep. Exactly, because they don't
have nowhere to go.
They got nowhere to go. They don't have resources. Is it an extremely effective way of controlling women, denying access to education? Right. It is a great equalizer, education. It is an economic equalizer. It is a social equalizer. It's a political equalizer. It is a great equalizer. Therefore, a great method of control.
Which societies have done for centuries. It's a human rights violation when you think about it. If you deny somebody education, it's absolutely wrong and really a violation of humanity.
Well, it's also that's why it's also one of the UN Women's main campaigns is education for women, education and economic equality, along with climate control and also preventing violence against women and girls.
Stay tuned for more of Women Road Warriors coming up.
Dean Michael, the tax doctor here. I have one question for you. Do you want to stop worrying about the IRS? If the answer is yes, then look no further. I've been around for years. I've helped countless people across the country, and my success rate speaks for itself. So now you know where to find good, honest help with your tax problems. What are you waiting for? If you owe more than $10,000 to the IRS or haven't filed in years, call me now at 888-557-4020 or go to mytaxhelpmd.com for a free consultation and get your life back.
Industry movement Trucking Moves America Forward is telling the story of the industry. Our safety champions, the women of trucking, independent contractors, the next generation of truckers, and more. Help us promote the best of our industry. Share your story and what you love about trucking. Share images of a moment you're proud of. And join us on social media. Learn more at truckingmovesamerica.com.
Welcome back to Women Road Warriors with Shelley Johnson and Kathy Tuccaro.
If you're enjoying this informative episode of Women Road Warriors, I wanted to mention Kathy and I explore all kinds of topics that will power you on the road to success. We feature a lot of expert interviews. Plus, we feature celebrities and women who've been trailblazers. Please check out our podcast at womenroadwarriors.com and click on our episodes page. We're also available wherever you listen to podcasts, on all the major podcast channels like Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Amazon Music, Audible, you name it. Check us out and bookmark our podcast. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, LinkedIn, YouTube, and other sites. And tell others about us. We want to help as many women as possible. What is the progress women have made for equality and equal opportunities? And where do we still need to make progress? We're asking these questions for International Women's Day. Sometimes there's a big blind spot when we talk about where we are now and where we've been. Unless we can recognize where we've been in the larger feminist narrative, we're in serious trouble. We too often forget about what happened in the past and don't think about history in the current generation. Sometimes history repeats itself. Many times people don't realize that the progress women have made has only been for a short amount of time. We must continue to fight for our rights to achieve the equality we deserve. Too many women are still abused around the world and marginalized economically. We all need to get educated to stay empowered. A lack of education for women keeps entire families disenfranchised. We need to know the threats that stand in our way. Things like poverty gaps, which disproportionately impact women and children. We need to look at threats that loom over the horizon in the next few decades that will impact women and children the most. As part of International Women's Day, we're interviewing Lucia Kanter St, Amour, an esteemed San Francisco attorney, professor, author, and vice president emeritus of United Nations Women USA. Lucia is offering incredible insight on where we've been and where we need to go to continue our empowerment. Lucia, for those who aren't familiar, what does UN Women USA do?
Right. Well, so it's such a massive organization, as you could probably imagine. You've got, United Nations, and then you've got all these different branches of United Nations, of which UN Women is one, which evolved from other commissions and the way it was titled throughout the years, but now UN Women. And then UN Women is the umbrella organization. The base is New York City, and then they have 10 national committees. So they're, UN Women USA and UN Women Canada, UN Women Iceland, whatever, there are 10 of them. And their main job isn't so much the programming. UN Women has I think there are 6 main campaigns that you can, look them up on unwomen.org. And under the What We Do tab, I think is what it's called. And no, there's more than 6. There's probably more like 10. But anyway, and then the national committees help raise the money to fund those programs. So that's in a nutshell what the national committees do.
So you're helping level the playing field. You're helping elevate women and their quality of life, certainly helping with equality, helping with stopping violence against women. That's huge too. That's a serious problem across the world.
Yes, it is. And it goes hand in hand with economic empowerment and peace and security and education, again, that intersectionality. So, a lot of work to do there, and very complex, very, very complex. And it's just, you do whatever you can, in your own pocket of the world. You don't,
Right.
People, I think sometimes they wait, they think they're waiting for their, their quote unquote big moment, on a national stage or international stage to make their big impact. And I think that's a mistake. You do, all the little bits add up. You do whatever you can in your own pocket of the world. Don't wait. The time is now. Just like I said, we have to be thinking about 27 years ahead of right now. It's the same thing. Time is a finite resource for all of us. So don't squander it. Don't squander a single day of it.
People tend to procrastinate, or they think, well, it's just like the statement, my vote doesn't count. That's garbage.
Well, right. Or my own backyard. If you can't see it
right.
from your own backyard, then it doesn't exist. So
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying is, well, look beyond your own backyard.
Yep.
And you might not like what you see. I get that. It's hard. And do it anyway. and what can you do? What can you do that's practical for you, that's workable for you to help out?
I do believe that we've made a lot of progress. I'm seeing women in higher corporate jobs, different types of professions. Certainly, Kathy, you've seen it where you work. So that's
my God, yeah.
progress. Yeah. So, I mean, we have made a lot of progress in a little over 100 years, but it does sometimes feel like there's a lot more to be done. Lucia, where do you feel that we've really made a lot of progress, and what are some of the real striking things that you feel we really need to work on? Somebody listening today, what they can help with.
What I was noticing over the course of the past year, I started seeing, when I was sort of out and about running errands, oh, there's a man out with young kids, the stroller or the little trikes or whatever, and without the mom. And it was just the father. I thought, see that very often. At least I hadn't seen that. And remember where I live. I'm in San Francisco. Okay. I'm in a pretty progressive place.
Sure.
Really pretty rare in the past, 20 years since I've been parenting, that you see just the dad out with the kids. Then I was seeing it more and more, like, oh, there's another one. There's another dad. And so just last week, I was out with my husband. I said, there's another one. I said, I don't think I'm imagining this. I think there are more fathers, taking the active caregiving role with their kids. And sure enough, even though the statistics from the 2022 Harvard Business Review Caregiver Economy report was that 75% of care work globally is done by women and girls, and most of it either unpaid or low wage. And I think that figure, at least in 2022, was 66% for the United States. And bear in mind, just sidebar, that a lot of those women are also holding down a quote unquote real job, right? And where they're struggling because they're seen as not necessarily a whole team player, because they're a caregiver too. And I'm not just talking about for kids, I'm talking about for elders. And that's going to be a big problem in the future as well, elder care. But so women and girls are doing it. In the meantime, women contribute something like 40% to household income. And in the poorest families, that shoots up to 86% for household income. Well, so I just finished saying this to my husband, I think just last week. And lo and behold, it was 2 days later, New York Times byline that more men than ever are now stay-at-home parents. They are the stay-at-home parent, and not just to give mom a break. And how that is because used to be very taboo for men. Like, they weren't taken seriously as a man if they were a stay-at-home dad. And we had these funny movies, like, remember Mr. Mom with Michael Keaton?
Yep.
And it was always like they were made into like they were just these boobs, right? Pun fully intended, that when because they don't, what do they know about it? So it was usually daddy daycare, right? So in the media, even, it was depicted as comical for a father to stay home with the kids. And now we have the highest percentage of men as stay-at-home parents than ever before in history. So I actually see that as a big sign of progress. I think that is really something to be celebrated. Now, in the meantime, we still have, according to the latest data, it will take 257 years at the current rate to close the gender pay gap. Okay, 257 years to close the gender pay gap. I just wanted to repeat it in case anyone
That's amazing.
the first time. Yeah. So, wow, that's a really long time. I don't like what's even going to be in fashion in 257 years. I don't even know. And so, yeah, that was out of the International Labor Organization, the 2022, it was actually a UN report. For every dollar men earn, women earn 77 cents. Women carry out at least 2.5 times more unpaid work than men. And at that current rate, it will take 257 years to close the global gender pay gap. So one of the things that I sort of talk about is, and this will get back to, I don't want people to get to the end of the podcast and go, she said she was going to talk about why she put salary in quotes, and then she never came back to that. I always make sure to close my loops when I'm teaching my law class. I make
Right.
sure to close all the loops. So I obviously am someone who would encourage more women to be negotiating, and to specifically to negotiate their compensation package. Okay, because generally what I get, the most number one request that I get from people for help for negotiation is this sort of desperate, panicked help. I'm, looking at getting a job offer soon, and maybe they're in the interview process, and how do I negotiate my salary? And I say, okay, back it up, sister. Okay, because first of all, actually, a negotiation doesn't start at the offer. It starts in the interview process. All right, with how you prepare for that, the questions you ask, because remember, they're not just interviewing you, you are interviewing them.
True.
Right? That's a two-way street. And you may know that you're desperate for the job. They do not know that. Okay. So be strategic in the interview process and with the questions that you ask. If you do get that offer, the way you respond to it is, first you say thank you. Negotiators still have manners. And then you ask a question. You ask, how did you calculate that? Or how did you come up with that? Or how did you arrive at that? Whatever your own words are, get them to tell you how they figured out that offer. What factors went into it. Maybe they missed something, right? But you need to know, where did it come from, that offer? How are they justifying it? Then the second question you ask is, when do you need an answer? And then you use that time to prepare your counter offer.
Right.
I'm going to say it again, counter offer, because this is normal. It is not super aggressive. It is not reading the room, or not being a team player, or not being grateful, or not being cooperative, or being manipulative, or being greedy, or any of those things. It is normal. And if you did not negotiate your first job offer out of school, whereas a man hired in your equivalent position did, because women actually have negotiated their job offers 8 times less often than men. When you calculate what that has cost you, just avoiding that one negotiation, that single negotiation, over the course of your career, it's costing you over $1 million.
Wow.
Okay, economists have calculated this. So that's some serious cash. All right, that's an education fund for your kids. That's a house. That's some solar panels on your talking about environmental crisis, right? That's retirement. That's a whole lot of things that money can be used for. So by being overly cooperative, or wanting to be liked, or whatever, showing what a team player you are, you probably have actually failed your first assignment by not doing that. So then what happens is, I actually get people, or I'll see it on social media. They say, quit telling women they're not negotiating. It's blaming the victim. Like, okay, and women actually are negotiating, because this new study out of Berkeley Haas School shows that women actually do negotiate. I said, okay, hold on. Wait, this actually does not make sense to me. Something is not adding up about this. First of all, I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not blaming the victim. And I'm certainly not suggesting that individual women negotiating their compensation package. Remember, it's a package. Salary is one aspect of it, but oftentimes salary really isn't negotiable. So there are lots of other avenues for you to negotiate, like hybrid work schedule, or a transit pass, or a parking place, or maybe a meal kit box, or a gym membership, or I could do that all day. So I'm going to stop there. But you start to see all the different threads of negotiation, all which translate to money. Okay, so no, not blaming the victim, and I'm not suggesting that just by individual effort, we're going to close that gender pay gap, right? It also has to be legislative. It also has to be corporate. Corporations are actually losing something like $35 billion per year in the United States by not tracking caregiver status of its employees and implementing programs and policies to support them. Okay, so things like that, but we can't just leave it up to the corporations either. Let me get back to that study where people say, quit saying women aren't negotiating because they are. I looked at the study because that's what I do. When someone says research shows, I say, what research? Where is it? Show it to me. And then I go and I actually look at it. So the research people are talking about, when I kind of popped the hood of that, right? It was actually 3,400 students and recent graduates of not just business schools, so MBAs, but quote unquote top business schools who said, yes, they did negotiate their, and they said salary, the article, but I'm going to still say compensation package. Well, okay, first of all, this is not representative of the general population. These are women who are already, again, it's like the MBA gets back to the whole, negotiation is for business. Okay, these are MBA candidates and recent graduates who are MBAs.
Right.
This is a subset of women who they are more likely to already think of themselves as negotiators, and they've already sort of been trained in their MBA program to think that way. This
Sure.
is not representative. It's actually, I actually find it to be misleading, and it does not do much to dispel the myth that negotiation is for business when it's actually everybody's business. I forget your original question, but I think I probably answered it.
Yeah, you covered a lot of different directions in terms of basically helping women continue their momentum in the right direction, being assertive, being able to negotiate, being proactive. These are all things that are super, super important. And I would think
Yeah.
this
Mhm.
starts with when you're a little girl, so that you know it's okay to do this. And yes, I can.
Yes.
And
Right.
obviously, in different parts of the world, you're going to have different obstacles. But like you said, everybody in their own backyard working to go in the right direction.
Yes, and think about it really strategically too, and specifically. So when I talk about education and intersection of environmental crisis and women's rights, what I also am saying to say my nieces, I have 2 nieces in high school right now, so they're thinking about what am I going to be studying in college, and I'm like, how about chemistry? How about renewable architecture? In other words, something that will make you indispensable. And that's actually one of my
Yep.
titles available on Amazon. It's called Indispensable. What's the subtitle? How are feminists getting women's rights wrong? And it's this whole idea of the intersection of the climate crisis and women's rights, and that in order to not be relegated back to the biological distinction, right, and those roles, due to the depletion of free and abundant energy, we need to make ourselves indispensable so that it will simply be too dangerous and too costly to society and its advancement to relegate us back to the home. So that's what I tell young women now is, what can you do? What discipline can you go into that will make you indispensable? So it's more than just step into your confidence, internalize your voice. It's more than that stuff. And I would say yes to all of that too. But let's get specific here. Let's get material about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not screwing around, Kathy and Shelley. I'm like, these are not just, I'm not just blowing smoke here. Let's talk, brass tacks about what we mean.
Yep.
You could be a chemist, become involved in the development of new antibiotics, because those are going to erode too. Become indispensable.
I like that. That's good advice to anyone when you think about it, especially as technology evolves, that people are worried about AI and how human beings are going to become basically obsolete. Women proving their value by being indispensable, there's no way they can be ignored.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Right. We're just good. We're going to need you.
Yeah.
We will need you. We cannot just relegate you back to, the Bronze Age.
Mm-hmm. And of course, the baby steps in terms of some of the cultural viewpoints where some people do feel that women are inferior. That takes time. And it's going to be a huge challenge. But like you said, everybody gets involved. That's what's important in your own little backyard.
Yeah. Broaden your view in terms of what's outside your own backyard. And then do what you can in your own backyard.
Because empowering women, that's going to stop the violence, the sex trafficking, the terrible things we're seeing. And it seems like that's on the increase, not decrease. It's very problematic.
It is. That's related. Sorry, Kathy, please.
Oh, I was going to say, it's funny that you say that, Shelley, is because I've been saying this for years, that you help one woman stand back on her own 2 feet and change her life, she will change a community. Because by her helping herself, she's now going to help her daughters, she's going to help her nieces, she's going to help her sisters, she's going to help her mother, she's going to help extended family. And each one of those, it becomes that ripple effect, because now that all these people are better, they're going to help. It goes on and on and on. That's how community is built.
That's
Because if
right.
you just look at my own personal story, how drugged down I was, and how, so almost hopelessly desperate for change and for life. And I was so, I can't even begin to put words on my state of mind back in 2011, my homeless picture. Well, look at me now. When you put the pictures from 2011 to the cover on the magazine that was last week that came out, the amount of people that I have been able to help, because I've helped myself first and foremost, I'm in the thousands and thousands and thousands of women worldwide that I've been able to assist find their own power. And by
Hmm.
finding their power, they enable their own loved ones to find their power, and so on and so forth. So it's
That's
a
just
big
it.
Yep.
thing.
It
Yep.
is. It's a regenerative attitude. And when women get money, when women do accumulate education and then wealth, women use it differently than men, and they invest it just in distinct ways from men. They generally donate more back to their communities and to charity in both time and money. They invest more in ESG dedicated companies, and this is according to reports by Forbes, Fidelity, and RBC Wealth Management. So yes, they are sharing the wealth in order to build more strength. Um, as a force of a whole new society of strong, educated, independent women. It's regenerative. Women use their money in a more regenerative fashion.
Which is so important. Lucia, where do you recommend women start? Like you said, in their backyard, where would they start making these changes? I mean, it just seems so logical, but I think people sometimes hesitate because they're not sure where they can actually begin.
Uh, so which one? With supporting women with fewer resources who have maybe been impacted by climate. A lot of women like that have had to leave their homeland, for example. And then I
Mhm.
know, of course, the immigration and the is a very complicated problem in our country. It is extremely complex. So I'm not sure if you're asking me about that, where to start, or if you're asking me about like where to start with like negotiating. I want to make sure I'm answering the right question.
Sure. Well, I'm thinking elevating women, getting them away from sex trafficking and the violence and elevating their income. All of these things are empowering. And these are some of the things I think that are the most pressing. And how do people go about that? I mean, it seems like such
Yeah,
a big thing to go after.
it does, doesn't it? And it's sort of
Mhm.
daunting. And then you end up feeling like, well, there's nothing really I can do because I'm just this one person. But I would look up, and this is, again, the beauty of the interwebs that we have is that you
Mhm.
can look up an immigration center in your area, a women's shelter in your area, or some sort of there's one that used to be called Dress for Success, something where you're helping to women who have survived, maybe abuse,
Mhm.
or are here, have left their homeland and trying to start a new life here, get employment, and to teach interviewing skills and to wardrobe them, donating your clothes to a place like that, even something just like that,
Mhm.
donating your
Mhm.
clothes to a women's shelter, right? Even something like that is a place to start.
Baby steps, every little thing
Because if you
helps.
start
Yeah.
pulling on one thread,
Mhm.
it's gonna lead to others. So just start
Yep.
pulling on one thread.
I love
It's
that.
like that's what I've been doing for years. I started going back when I first got my job in 2013. I started giving back to the community by going back to where I started, which was the Wellspring Recovery Program. They
Mm-hmm.
were giving these 25 women their self-esteem class by putting on a Joyce Meyer video. These
Mm-hmm.
are hardcore addicts, and I mean, no offense to Joyce Myers, but it wasn't quality. It wasn't the right thing. Like, it wasn't for the level of the need that these women had. So I started giving back there for free. And then I started giving back to the women's shelter for free, going
Mm-hmm.
sharing my story and how I got out, and then going
Mm-hmm.
to the youth centers and going to schools. And now I make a point of every single city that I visit I'm going to find the local shelter and I'm going to go talk to them, and I'll give away my book for free and just sit there and have a conversation because I can inspire them. I've even gone to Barbados. Well, I go there. I went there 3 years in a row to the shelters down there and to the schools and create community events. And I went down to their women's prison, and I went there 2 years in a row, and I was shocked because the first year I went in, I had 35 women, and I sat 3.5 hours with them. And then, I gave a bunch of my books. I came back the next year, and oh my God, there was 4 ladies in particular that were still there, that they were quoting my book. They were doing finding education. They were creating goals. They were making a plan for what they're going to do when they get out, and they were removing their toxic relationships. I was stunned to see the difference in 1 year, how they could apply themselves by just giving a little hope and inspiration, and for free.
That's just it. So in addition to doing it, then keep doing it and go back and revisit and follow up and check on people. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Empowering women. That's the catalyst to change. And then that's what you're doing in every little bit. I mean, that's just so important. And you're giving people a new hope and inspiration. Isn't that really what humanity's supposed to be? Because if we don't have the hope, we don't have the inspiration, we're just going to stay stuck.
It's incredibly important, actually, in negotiation as well, to remain optimistic.
Okay.
It really is.
That makes sense. Yeah, because if you go in with a pessimistic attitude, you're going to say, well, I couldn't win that one anyway.
Exactly. It's just too easy to surrender. Remaining optimistic really does matter. Not in a sense that, well, everything's fine, because that's one of the reasons we have such a negativity bias in the media, because well, number one, it sells and it activates the negativity bias in the brain. And it's also because, well, if all we heard was good news, well, then we would think, well, there's nothing that needs to change, So it's partly hearing the bad news that catalyzes us to make things better, so do that with an attitude of optimism.
I like that.
That it's possible.
Everything's possible. Well, and this is what's wonderful. International Women's Day. That's something that gets people thinking about the possibilities. And that's what it's all about. And this has been wonderful. Lucia, I want to talk about the world's problems for another hour, but we can't.
Yeah.
Where do people find you? Because I'm sure that they want to pick up your books and read them, because your insight's terrific.
Yeah. Just Google my name, Lucia Kanter St. Amour. You're going to find me. It's you'll see interview videos. You'll see my books on Amazon. You'll see my website. I'm actually on sabbatical this year, writing my 4th book, my 5th title, but 4th book. And it's a dual timeline, sweeping epic women's historical fiction novel based on primary sources, and it's a true story.
Wow.
So you optimistically speaking, if everything stays on track, that should be releasing fall of 2025. And you can see a synopsis of it on my website.
Excellent. Lucia, I always love talking to you. This has been terrific.
I love talking to you too, and the time goes by so fast, because I always think, gosh, an hour is an awfully long time. And then, oh, look, a whole hour went by and I've
and it's over.
So there you go.
Like I said, I would love to be in one of your classrooms. I mean, when I was in college, there were profs that just, you had to take a lot of notes just so you wouldn't fall asleep. But that would not be you, not at all.
No. I was fun. I did it for 20 years. I was fun.
That's but people learn when things are fun.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Thank you for being on the show. This is a wonderful treat. Thank you.
Don't be a stranger.
Okay, sounds good.
Bye.
All right, bye now. We hope you've enjoyed this latest episode. And if you want to hear more episodes of Women Road Warriors or learn more about our show, be sure to check out womenroadwarriors.com. And please follow us on social media. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. Women Road Warriors is on all the major podcast channels like Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Audible, YouTube, and others. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Women Road Warriors with Shelley Johnson and Kathy Tuccaro. If you want to be a guest on the show or have a topic or feedback, email us at sjohnson@womenroadwarriors.com.